from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Tuesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And big story today, Trump has been indicted again, a second time in the election subversion case brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Listen to this.
Federal prosecutors today issued a revised version of an indictment accusing former President Trump of plotting to overturn the 2020 election, stripping out some charges in order to help it survive the Supreme Court's recent ruling, granting former presidents broad immunity for official acts in office. Well, former President Trump issued quite the lengthy diatribe there on Truth Social. This was one part of it. He said in response, quote, in an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt in Washington, D.C., in an act of desperation and in order to save face, the illegally appointed, quote unquote, special counsel, deranged Jack Smith, has brought a ridiculous new indictment against me, which has all the problems of the old indictment and should be dismissed immediately, all caps. His Florida document hoax case has been completely dismissed. This is merely an attempt to, all caps, interfere with the election and distract the American people from the catastrophes Kamala Harris has inflicted on our nation, like the border invasion, migrant crime, rampant inflation, the threat of World War III, and more.
That, again, part of the statement from El Trompito Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States. And, and he went on. I mean, he didn't just stop there when he talked about that. He went on. Just check this out. He says, for them to do this immediately after our Supreme Court victory on immunity and more is shocking. I've also been informed by my attorneys that you're not even allowed to bring cases literally right before an election, a direct assault on democracy. This is an unprecedented abuse of the criminal justice system. The case has nothing to do with conspiracy to obstruct the 2020 presidential election, when they are the ones that actually did something that obstructed on Election Day, not me. They cheated on the election, and they go after me for cheating on the election. Interestingly, this comes at the exact same time as Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook has admitted to concealing massive amounts of information, such as Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, which is a direct acknowledgement that the 2020 presidential election was manipulated and rigged by the Department of Justice. What they're doing now is the single greatest sabotage of our democracy in history. He went on. This travesty is now on Comrade Kamala Harris, as I call her, Comrade Kamala, who is actively pushing it rather than immediately calling for its dismissal, as she should be. This is for the third world countries and banana republics, not for the USA. As Jack Smith knows, the whole case should be thrown out and dismissed on presidential immunity grounds, as he's already been unequivocally told by the U.S. Supreme Court. Smith rewrote the exact same case in an effort to circumvent the Supreme Court decision. The people of our country will see exactly what's happening with all of these corrupt lawsuits against me and will reject them by giving an overwhelming victory to me on November 5th as president of the United States. This is a third section. No presidential candidate or candidate of any office has ever put up with any of this lawfare and weaponization directly out of the office of a political opponent. They've weaponized local district attorneys and attorneys general, and nobody else will listen. And they do this to interfere with the upcoming 2024 presidential election. This has never been done before. This is now Kamala's weaponized system against her political opponent, All of these scams will fail, just as deranged Jack Smith's hoax in Florida has been fully dismissed, and we will win the most important election in the history of our country on November 5th. Make America great again. Bravo, El Trompito firing back, being the counterpuncher that he is. Now, of course, the left and critics will say he went on a tirade, blah, blah, blah. If he doesn't, who will? If he doesn't call this stuff out and have those in the media report on it and talk about it, comment on it, it goes away. And then the only story out there is Trump got indicted yet again. This guy's a criminal. And why do they do it now? They need it because we have a debate coming up soon, right? Kamala has agreed to a debate. She's also agreed to do an interview finally. I should probably clap for Kamala. The caveat, she's only going to do an interview at CNN, and it's going to be this week on Thursday, but she's going to do it only if Tiananmen Tim Walz is with her. That's right. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz will sit for a joint interview with CNN on Thursday. The interview, conducted by chief political correspondent and anchor Dana Bash, will air at 9 p.m. on Thursday. We'll bring you all of the highlights at 10 o'clock live Eastern when we come on the air. Harris's lack of formal news conferences or interviews has generated criticism from her Republican rivals. A matter of fact, Kennedy was just talking about that yesterday, and maybe we'll play the clip of that when we come back after the break, because that's something I want to get into. Here's a quote. Let me see. Here's a quote from J.D. Vance. He says, I think it's really disgraceful both for Kamala Harris, but also for a lot of the American media that participates in this stuff, to have a person who has been the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party for 17 days and refuses to take a single question from the American media. That was J.D. Vance. That was 20 days ago. That number is now up to 37 days and nada, right? She's literally done a couple of speeches, off of a teleprompter. Everything was scripted. Nothing off the cuff, nothing off the dome, nothing where she's pressed by the voters or even the media. And that's alarming, right, to say the least. Now, Kennedy had called her out for this, saying that, this was the organs of the Democrat Party and the media that were actively covering for her, and that the American people deserve to hear from her. And I tried to get Kennedy to come on the show, but he was very busy, probably because he was on with Dr. Phil. And Dr. Phil's busy interviewing Trump, too. Dr. Phil's getting all the big ones right now. Maybe we need to bring Dr. Phil on the show, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Dr. Phil sitting down with President Trump and with RFK separately. Don't miss it. That's coming up next. We're going to sit down with Dr. Phil and have a little bit of a conversation on both of those interviews, plus everything else that's going on with Merritt Street Media and his reaction to what's going on in the news. And what else do we got? Oh, we're going to talk about a few things. I got a few things up my sleeve tonight. It's going to be a good one. Let's see. Let me just recap a couple of things real quick for you here. All right, maybe I don't do that. Anyway, we've got that. We've got Seamus Bruner. He's an expert on China, and he's going to tell us all about what is going on with, listen to this, with the ties that Tiananmen Tim Walz has to the communist Chinese. We've been hearing a lot about it. He's going to break it down for us. And a little bit after that, we're going to get into a conversation with Dr. Warren Ferrell, who's scheduled to be with us. He's a relationship coach who's also a PhD in political science. And his whole angle is teaching people how to get along in a politically divisive situation, right? So if you're at a family dinner and, different sides of the aisle, how do you handle that? How do you approach that? Well, we're going to have that conversation with him. He's got a book called Rollmate to Soulmate. But first, I want to sit down and chat with Dr. Phil as soon as we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
There is no scenario where the President of the United States can't head up a press conference. Under any scenario, every president has been able to address the press, and in the good times and the bad times. she has to start talking to the press. Period. There's no optionality. There's no scenario where anybody would be comfortable, particularly in the swing states where swing voters are thinking to myself, what do we got here? Why won't she talk to the press? I'm asking it from a policy guy. I need explanations for these policies because I have to invest on these policies. I have questions, and I don't get any answers. I'm not being unreasonable. Come out wherever you are and talk to the press.
That is Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary on the Fox News Channel, complaining that Kamala Harris is not doing any interviews. Nothing is unscripted. Everything is behind a teleprompter at a rally. There's no sit down with somebody from the media. It's not like, listen, she has an open invitation to come on with me, Rich Valdez, right? I'd love to do that. But she's not interested. And I understand. She doesn't want to be tested. She's, trying to wait the clock out as best as possible and do the safest interviews possible. But that's not the case on the other side, right? On the other side, you've got El Trompito, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, El Presidente, Donald J. Trump. And he's doing interviews all over the place, whether they're friendly or not friendly. He does them all. Matter of fact, he just did one with a huge interviewer. I know, you're thinking, with you, Rich Valdez? No, that was a few months back that we did that. He did it with Dr. Phil, right? The legendary TV talk show host that has been on airwaves forever. Now he's got his own network. Dr. Phil, welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me back on, Rich. I always enjoy talking to you.
Likewise, sir. And as I was just saying in the lead into this, President Trump sat down with you. You guys at Merit Street Media released that today. And I want you to give the audience here a little bit of a taste of what that was like, because unlike Kamala Harris, who I call Que Mala Eres, he actually does sit down for these interviews. And you're not one to pull punches, whether you like the guy or not. You're going to ask the questions that need to be asked. So how did it go down?
Well, I asked the questions that I think the viewers want to have answers to, and I didn't feel like he had a really in-depth conversation about the assassination attempt, the attempt on his life since it had really happened, and I think people really wanted to know what has been your reaction to that. First off, and when I interviewed him previously, people said he was really different, that he responded like he never had with anyone else. And so, he kind of joked and said, you're my psychiatrist. You're not going to get me to cry in this interview. And I said, I'm not attempting to, but I do ask different questions and go from a different point of view. And I asked him, I said, listen, it's been 7 or 8 weeks since the attempt on your life, and frankly, you were shot in the head. You were shot in the ear. It grazed your head on the side, and a bad shot could have gotten a kill shot out of the 6 or 8 shots that went by you. So I want to ask you, why do you think you were spared? Why do you think you are still here today? You've had to reflect on that. And, he was very pensive about it. And he did say that he's reflected on it, that he's watched the video a number of times. And he kind of started out a little mechanically about it. But then he said, look, I really think I was spared, and I'm paraphrasing now, but because I'm not finished. I think I have work yet to do, and I think that work is in serving the American people. I think that's what I'm supposed to do, and I don't think I'm finished doing that yet. And I asked him, how do you think you were spared? And he said it clearly was the hand of God. The hand of God had to bend those bullets. It had to turn me at the right moment or the right time. And I very seriously believe that I have to make the most out of this opportunity. And I take it very seriously. He was kind of saying, previously this was a job and a passion, and I feel like now it's a mission. And I'm going to make the most of that. But he really believes that it was the hand of God that spared his life that day. And I asked him straight up, do you believe in God? And do you think that was the primary thing that spared you? And he said, yes, I do. And yes, I think that's why I'm still here.
Amigos, we're on with Dr. Phil.
Coming from him, I think those are pretty powerful words.
Oh, I don't disagree, Dr. Phil. I think, the only, other than the interview that you've done, the only other instance he talked about that was at the Republican National Convention, where he kind of said, look, I want to talk about this now, and I'm not going to talk about it again. And it was brief. I'm looking forward to seeing your interview with him. I haven't had the opportunity yet. But I think it's great that you have that opportunity to get that side of the story. And I think it's also great that we have a candidate that's willing to do these interviews and to sit down in long form to actually answer some questions, unlike Kamala Harris, who's not doing that. Now, I can't imagine that you would be discriminating against Kamala Harris. I'm imagining you've invited her on your show and she's just not accepted. Is that correct?
I've asked numerous. We have a formal request in to President Biden. We have a formal request in to Vice President Harris. I've agreed. I've said that my wife Robin and I will sit down with she and her husband if that's more comfortable. And listen, Rich, I would never disrespect Kamala Harris because I would never disrespect the office of Vice President. I would never disrespect President Biden because I would never disrespect the office of the President of the United States. That is not a good look to the rest of the world. That doesn't mean that I wouldn't ask hard questions, legitimate questions, and give them the opportunity to answer those questions. But I do think that right now, I don't think she has said anything that wasn't scripted and impromptu. And she's a former prosecutor where she's made her closing arguments that were scripted and written on a pad in front of her. And I think she has developed that skill and does it well. But you know what? When you get into the role of President of the United States and you're having to deal with world leaders and you're in a pressure cooker and having to make difficult decisions on the spur of the moment, you can prepare for it, but you can't be scripted because you don't know what they're going to say. You don't know what they're going to do. You have to be able to think on your feet, make prudent decisions, have the courage to stick with those things. And I think that's what a debate is about. And if this debate uses prompters and uses notes, then we're not really seeing, are those her words or are those the words of her handlers, her people that have written down pivot points and talking points? That's not what people want to hear. They want to hear from her. They want to hear from President Trump. They want to hear these people, how they really think and feel. That's how you get to know someone.
And the truth is, they not only do they want to hear from them, but oftentimes I feel people want to hear from a voice that they trust. This show, my predecessor, Jim Bohannon, and his predecessor, Larry King, these were trusted voices that people trusted and respected, just like people trust and respect you, Dr. Phil. And I think that's important as well. People want to hear that dialogue. Stick with me, Dr. Phil. Amigos, we're coming right back. The music means they're kicking us out, but we're going to come back. Dr. Phil also scored an interview with RFK Jr. He was on our show last week, but I want to hear what's going on post-endorsement. We're going to find out from Dr. Phil coming up straight ahead. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I think if my dad were alive today, he would detest almost everything about Donald Trump. His lying, his selfishness, his racism, his cynicism, hatred, fascist sympathies, deliberate misinformation about vaccines, criminal felony convictions, rape of E. Jean Carroll, his contempt for the poor and suffering, for ethics, for democracy and his healing, and his cruel sneering at human rights. Personally, I completely disavow and separate and disassociate myself from my brother, Bobby Kennedy, and his flagrant and inexplicable effort to desecrate and trample and set fire to to Daddy's memory. I love Bobby, and I have tremendous respect for a lot of the work that he's done in the past. But on this, he's wrong. And on this, it's really important for people to understand that the Kennedy family endorses Harris. And we do so because that's who represents our values and our vision, and that of Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy.
That's Kerry Kennedy. She's the sister of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and the daughter of RFK, the niece of JFK. And she's saying it is Harris that the family has endorsed. The issue here is that Harris isn't the one making news, because it's Bobby Kennedy that's making the news, because he got with Trump. And this dynastic figure in American Democrat politics breaks rank, right? And says, I'm coming over here. And again, he's not just your run-of-the-mill Democrat. I think, he's a Kennedy. B, he was a big progressive radio host in New York City for a very long time. I used to listen to his show just to get ready to argue. So, that's how that goes. But Bobby Kennedy has put his gravitas behind Donald Trump, as we know, on Friday. And he sat down for an interview with Dr. Phil, which is scheduled to release mañana. Dr. Phil, welcome back. Tell us about your conversation with RFK Jr.
Well, this was really interesting for me, Rich. And it was a busy day because I was with Donald Trump in Las Vegas, where we did the interview, and then RFK Jr. was having his press conference in Phoenix. And as soon as I finished the interview in Vegas with Trump, I jumped on the airplane, ran to Phoenix, and it was just a little over an hour that I was sitting down with RFK Jr. And my last question for President Trump was, how do you feel about RFK Jr. Giving you his support? And he spoke to that. That was my last question to him. And then when I got to Phoenix, RFK Jr. walked off the stage of his press conference and right into a room and sat down with me and gave the first interview he had given since he announced his support of the Trump campaign. So I was able to ask him about that. And, I asked him, I said, this had to be a difficult decision, because this came at a very high price for you to run, because his family came out against him when he announced. Mm-hmm. They didn't just come out against him when he threw his support to the Republican side. They came out against him when he announced that he was running at all. Right. And said really critical things about him. And I will tell you, like a lot of people, I've seen a lot of the things that RFK Jr. has been painted with the brush of criticizing vaccines for children and things of that nature. And I've interviewed him before, and I asked him about all of these theories, all these conspiracy theories. And when you actually sit down and talk with this man and listen to the science behind what he says, he makes a lot more sense than I think people that read just headlines give him credit for. Yeah. For example, he's moved his position on vaccines for children. His objection was to all the mercury that was in these vaccines. The mercury is now at barely trace levels for vaccines for children, and he doesn't have a problem with that anymore. His problem was with the mercury in these vaccines, and he talked to Donald Trump about his concerns about chronic disease, diseases in children, about the nutritional problems in America that are taking up as much as 95% of our healthcare dollars in America, and found some real kinship between those things, and that they had some things in common, and he was able to really put some planks in the platform. And they agreed on those things, and they agreed that they disagree about some things. but they do disagree on getting out of foreign wars. They do agree about that. They do agree on making some changes in some of the medications that people are addicted to. They have some agreement on what children are being fed and chronic diseases that have been allowed to develop since 1985. They have a lot of things they agree on. And I asked him straight up, are you going to actively campaign for Donald Trump for president? And he said, yes, I am. I am actively going to be on the trail. I'm actively going to campaign for him. And I said, you've had as much as double-digit support in some of the swing states, because the experts. Look, I'm not a political guy. I have people that say, hey, you need to stay in your own lane, deal with your psychosocial and cultural issues, and stay out of politics. I'm not in politics. I don't know the first thing about politics. I can read, and I read the experts say that there are about 15 counties in the swing states of Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida, Texas, and Nebraska that are likely to determine the outcome of this election. And I know that RFK Jr. had double-digit leads in some of these counties in some of these swing states. And if a significant portion of those go over to Trump, I asked him at the end of our election, I said, is it possible that I'm sitting here with the one individual that may have the most influence on who's going to be the next president of the United States? And he said, well, actually, that is very possible. Because if he puts his support the way that he has, and those people that have confidence in him take his suggestion and support Trump in this election, he very well might be the one that chooses the next president of the United States.
And that's really an interesting turn of events, right? That you would have the son of assassinated AG, Bobby Kennedy, nephew of a former president, teaming up with another almost assassinated former president that's running for re-election. I mean, it's just on those facts, it's somewhat historical and has, I think, some historical significance. And just interesting to see that there's this synergy between Democrats and Republicans. And I was making the case last night that I feel that the Tulsi Gabbard endorsement, the Bobby Kennedy endorsement are very different than a Adam Kinzinger endorsement or a Liz Cheney endorsement, because they're not really thought leaders within the Republican Party, right? The way Bobby Kennedy is a thought leader in his world of progressive politics, especially in the area of vaccines and health freedom and whatnot. Tulsi Gabbard as well, she was a 2020 presidential candidate. Liz Cheney and the other guy are not like that. So I think these particular endorsements carry more weight. Do you agree with that, disagree with that? Do you think that they're going to have a big impact?
Well, I do think so, because I think they have a lot of credibility with their followers. These were not passive individuals. They were actively engaging with followers and have a dialogue with those people. And I think when they turn to them and say, I was listening to I listened to you obsessively, and I was listening to your conversation with Tulsi Gabbard last night, and she was saying that him being a commander in chief was very important to her. And I think when she gives her reasons, I think people that respected her for the reasons they did value her judgment about why she's doing what she's doing. And I think the same thing's true with Robert Kennedy. He told his people, we started with an agenda, and I'm not abandoning that agenda. The best place for me to continue the work we've done together, the money you've donated, the effort you've put in, the time we've invested in this is with the Trump campaign. That's the best way for us to continue working on what we believe in. And we agreed that we're not going to agree on everything, and I'll stand up for those things that we don't agree on. But these things that are important to us, this is the best place for us to continue fighting the fight on the things that are important to us. And I think people will listen to that. And not everybody, but I think people will. I think a significant portion will. and they know where Trump stands on those things because, like you said, he's out there answering questions. And I hope that Kamala Harris does the same thing. I hope she'll talk to me. I hope she'll talk to you. Yeah. I think she's going to have to talk to everybody, and I'll ask her fair questions and give her a fair opportunity to answer them. And I think that's what she needs to do, so people get to know where she actually stands instead of what some political handlers have given to her. She needs to answer questions.
100%. Folks, we're on with Dr. Phil. If you didn't recognize that voice, Dr. Phil is a legendary TV host, and he's got this brand new network called Merit Street Network, and we're going to talk a little bit of shop when he comes back. But Dr. Phil, just to put a cap in this, these are, I think, amazing interviews that you've done. I did see a couple of clips preparing for this interview, and kudos on those. And what I will say is, you've interviewed millions of people, right? Or tons of people, and I've done a lot of political interviews in my time, and I think you get a gist for people that are full of it and people who are on the level. And some of the people we're talking about right now, Trump, RFK, Gabbard, they really strike me as altruists. They strike me as people who really are in it to win it, that really could be making money doing other things that are a lot easier and more fun, like doing what we do, right? Talking and being on TV. It's way easier than being in politics and all the fire that you take. Literally, look at Trump, the fire he's taking. He's under fire. And then there's other people who dodge the interviews and who like Kamala Harris or Biden and the rest of this crew. And it just makes you wonder. And you don't have to respond to that. I don't want to put you in a corner. But I just find it so interesting to see how this is shaping up with just the fact of who's willing to actually talk to the people. Just remarkable. Anyway, folks, we're coming right back with Dr. Phil. We're going to talk about Merit Street Media and more. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The endearing voice of the great one, Mark Levin, saying nice things about me. God bless you, sir. Love him. Folks, we are back. We are back with Dr. Phil McGraw. You know him as Dr. Phil from TV. He is fantastic. And Dr. Phil, and by the way, Dr. Phil, one of my favorite listeners of this show. Now, Dr. Phil, I want to ask you a question, because now you've got Merit Street Media, right? You're out of your network TV contract, and you're an entrepreneur in the media space, and this is an exciting thing because this thing is blowing up, right? The streaming media is everywhere, and let us say,
it's been great.
Yeah. What is the I guess the next step, and how has it been? Last time you were with us, you were launching Merit Street. I guess what's the update on that?
Well, at this point, we've been really fortunate in terms of our growth. We're now available in about 100 million homes throughout the United States, which makes us the biggest launch since Fox.
That's fantastic. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And we couldn't be more excited about it. And we have an app called Merit Plus. You can just go to Google Store or anywhere that you get your apps and download it. It's free, and you can watch live on any of your devices, or you can watch any of the Dr. Phil primetime shows. And we've got several hours of news throughout the day. We've got Dr. Phil primetime. We've got Steve Harvey's part of our network. Nancy Grace is part of our network. We've got cops and jail and all kinds of things in the network. And I am apolitical, Rich. I really am. I've voted for both parties. I've voted independent before. I've thrown my hands up and not voted. I'm embarrassed to say.
It's like a real American, right? I think that's the majority of people.
Exactly. I deal with cultural issues, and sometimes that's what politicians talk about. But I'm not trying. I don't understand geopolitics, and I don't think a lot of people that talk about it do. I'm just willing to admit it.
Right.
But I do understand cultural issues. I think family is the backbone of this country, and I think families are under attack in America, and that's what we talk about it on Merritt Street, and I think that's what people respond to. And I look at things differently. I read that letter yesterday from Zuckerberg to Jim Jordan. And everybody's talking about, look what Zuckerberg's doing. Look what Zuckerberg's doing. Look what they did. Look what they did. You know what bothered me about that is, it said senior officials in the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content. You know what I'm wondering? Who were those people? Yeah. The private enterprise, they can do whatever they want. We may not like it. We may be offended by it, but they're private enterprise. The people in the government are not private enterprise. They owe a fiduciary duty to all of us. Who were those people? We need to find out who those people were that were over there manipulating the information flow, and they need to have their butts fired. We need to get them out of those jobs. They owe us a fiduciary duty. They have to put our interest ahead of their own, and they weren't. They were in there running their own agenda. We need to be focused on who those people were and get them out of those jobs.
Yeah, well, Dr. Phil, some of that was brought up in that Missouri case, the Murthy case, and that ultimately got decided, I think, poorly, allowing them to further censor speech, and that's really what got Bobby Kennedy in the race, was that they shut him up. And when they shut him up, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to run for president." You mess with the wrong guy. Now, let's just say you land a interview with Vice President Kamala Harris, and she agrees to sit down with you. And she says something funny like, "Cash me outside. How about that?" What are you going to say to that?
I really want to hear what she has to say, because I spent a lot of my career in the litigation arena as in trial sciences. That's how I found my way into television. I helped defend Oprah in the Mad Cow case up in Amarillo many, many years ago.
Wow.
And one of the things I always do with juries is I tell them, look, you need to focus on what people said then versus what they're saying now. What did they say then when they weren't being sued versus what they say now when they are? And in this situation, I'd be interested in saying, what do these candidates say then when they didn't need your vote versus now when they do?
Right.
And if there's a big difference, then you got to decide which lie do you want to believe, because there aren't versions of the truth. So what were they saying then? Was she saying things then when she didn't need your vote? And what's she saying now when she does? Are they different? And if they are, I would like her to explain those differences. I would ask that of any candidate. If they flip-flop around, what's the real truth and what's their agenda? Do they change because they want to tell you what you want to hear? What do they really think and what do they really believe? And I would have a series of then versus now questions for that candidate to see what the differences are and how they explain those.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Dr. Phil, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I wish you Godspeed with Merritt Street. It seems like you're doing an amazing job. The only thing you're missing is Rich Valdez in the daytime lineup, since I already have a nighttime job. But other than that, you're doing great. And I want to thank you for being here, sir.
Well, listen, thanks for what you do. You have so many people. You ask the questions that if a viewer had a microphone, they would ask that question, and you seem to always ask it right at the right time. So God bless you, my friend.
Thanks, Dr. Phil. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Tiananmen Tim Walz has connections to China. We're going to blow the lid off of him straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you this Tuesday night. We're live, we're national, and the phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to get into a couple of things. Of course, Jack Smith, the prosecutor for the Biden administration, he is back at it with one of those cases, saying that Trump again obstructed the 2020 election. Just crazy stuff. I talked about it a little bit last hour. I will get back into that probably at the top of the next hour. We also have Kamala Harris, now 37 days since announcing that she's running for president, and nada. She has not sat down for an interview, but I believe the silence has been broken as of this Thursday, right? She's going to do an interview on CNN this Thursday, but she says, I will only do it if I can bring Tiananmen Tim Walz with me. So Tiananmen Tim and Kamala Harris are going to do an interview. And I wonder if CNN is going to ask those questions. Will Dana Bash ask Kamala Harris the tough questions that need to be asked? Will she ask Tiananmen Tim about his ties to the Chinese Communist Party, to his ties to China? I don't know. But the House Oversight Committee is looking into that. You've got a lot of people that are looking into that. There was a big article in Breitbart not too long ago from our buddies at the Government Accountability Institute. And this is stuff that we have to talk about, right? This has to be explained. You can't just run for president and go unchecked, unvetted. It doesn't work that way. People have to pass muster and withstand some scrutiny. And that seems to be not happening right now. But I want you to listen to this report, because it sounds like things are picking up in that regard. Check this out.
Harris's running mate under investigation for his ties to China. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer asking the FBI for information about the connections Tim Walz has had to the CCP for the past few decades. Walz spent a year teaching in China and said he has visited the country around 30 times. In a letter to the FBI, Comer said in part, Walz has connections to CCP-connected entities and officials that make him susceptible to the party's strategy of elite capture, which seeks to co-opt influential figures in elite political, cultural, and academic circles to influence the United States to the benefit of the communist regime and the detriment of Americans.
So that's the report from Fox, and I got a lot of questions. So that's why I want to talk to Seamus Bruner. Seamus Bruner is the Director of Research at the Government Accountability Institute, and he's with us now. Seamus, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Rich, it's great to be with you. Yeah, the Chinese policy of elite capture is alive and well. We've been exposing it since 2018 with Joe Biden and so many others in Washington. And we kind of thought that with Joe Biden on the way out, China's influence over the White House would maybe be subsiding. But now we have Tiananmen Tim Walz to worry about.
Yeah, this guy is really something. And what I find so fascinating about him, really, and it really does, I see this guy and I think all sorts of red flags, right? Alarm bells, all sorts of things are going off. And I don't think I have any type of clairvoyance or sixth sense, but it seems like he's really coming across as some sort of mainstream, somebody's uncle. And they're like, oh, yeah, I really like the guy. I don't know if that's just the media influencing me or people actually do like the guy. What are you hearing? And tell us more.
Well, it's absolutely the media. I mean, they have not covered this issue at all, and it is a huge issue. I mean, it goes back 30 years. Starting at the beginning, Tim Walz goes over to China. He loves it so much. He's quoted in local press reports stating that his Chinese benefactors gave him so many gifts he couldn't bring them all home. And so then he sets up this student exchange program where with his wife, where he takes dozens of trips with the American students over to China. And he's quoted again in local press telling his students to downplay their Americanness. I mean, that's a really strange thing to tell students is be less American when you go over to China. And what we found is over the years, I mean, they have cultivated, these Chinese influence groups have cultivated ties to Congressman and then Governor Walz. He attends all of these events hosted by Chinese United Front, and that's a term for basically intelligence apparatus of the Chinese Communist Party. He's sponsored. His speeches are sponsored. They host fundraisers for him. And so the thing that's really troubling about Tim Walz is with the Bidens, and we exposed all of the CEFC money, and we got some $31 million that went to Biden family pockets. The thing about the Bidens is it seemed like it was all money. Joe Biden is a fairly moderate Democrat, but the problem with Tim Walz is that he actually seems to love the Chinese communist system. He says it's all about sharing and community. And so this is a guy who is really a fellow traveler, likes the Chinese Communist Party way of life.
This is crazy. And you know, you're right? Joe Biden is a crook, in my opinion. He's not a communist. I don't think he really buys into that philosophy. I do believe Tim Walz, right? When he talks about neighborliness and when his wife talks about the smell of the burning tires, this is the stuff of radicals, Seamus Bruner.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kamala Harris is, I mean, she's right there with him. I mean, she's talking basically about price controls. And so this is a very extreme ticket. I mean, where she says that it's not inflation that's making everything go up. It's this price gouging by basically every company everywhere. And so we need to bring the prices under control. And so, but with Tim Walz, I mean, there was some huge news that broke today about these secret police stations. There's only that we know of 7 in the United States, and one of them happens to be in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities region. It's hosted by this Chinese American Association of Minnesota, an organization very close to Tim Walz. The head of that organization hosted a fundraiser for Tim Walz in 2022. And a lot of Chinese spy type people were there, including a chief propagandist for one of these United Front working group outfits. And so these secret police stations, I mean, that's the colloquial term, but what the official Chinese Communist Party term is an overseas service center. And what they do is they sniff out Chinese dissidents. They intimidate people who are critical of the Chinese Communist Party. It's operating right there in Minnesota, and the people associated with it are hosting fundraisers for Tim Walz.
Yeah, there was one in Manhattan that the New York Post reported on not that long ago as well. Folks, we're on with Seamus Bruner, and you got to check out this article. He's got a great article in Breitbart that he wrote just recently. Exclusive, Seamus Bruner, 7 troubling Tim Walz connections to communist China. We're going to continue talking about Tim Walz. I like to call him Tiananmen Tim, and all of his ties to the communist Chinese. When we come back, don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night, your home for the best election coverage.
And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready. Our job for everyone watching is to get in the trenches and do the blocking and tackling.
That is Tim Walz, Tiananmen Tim Walz, and that's who we're talking about. And we're talking about him with Seamus Bruner. Seamus Bruner is from the Government Accountability Institute. And Seamus, we were talking about the 7 troubling Tim Walz connections to Communist China. We talked about a couple before the break. What else are you blowing the lid off in your Breitbart piece?
Yeah, well, it starts at the beginning with these student exchanges. These were subsidized by the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that is so unusual. I've never seen anything like it, where a person who's now in the running for vice president was sponsored by the Chinese Communist Party. They paid for the scholarships for students to come over and learn about how great China is. This is where Tim Walz told them to downplay their Americanness. But all of that sort of feels like ancient history, and that's certainly what the Walz team would like you to believe, is that this all happened a long time ago. That's just not true. He took his most recent trip while a congressman, possibly while he had security clearances, which other members of the House now want to investigate. You've got James Comer in the Oversight Committee, Jim Banks of the Select Committee on the CCP wants him investigated for foreign travel disclosures while in Congress. And then as governor, it gets even worse. I mean, right from the very get-go, he has a Chinese delegation, CCP diplomat, attend his inauguration. And so then that diplomat and the delegation goes on to meet with this Chinese American Association of Minnesota, and this is the group that sponsors the police station. They proceed to sponsor a bunch of events. Tim Walz is a keynote speaker. He's featured several times over the years in their literature. And then there's several other organizations. I won't, the acronyms are kind of a mouthful. I won't, bore you to tears with how the Chinese Communist Party names their outfits, but these are 100% cutouts for the military and intelligence apparatus of the Chinese Communist Party. And so I haven't seen any governor at all like Tim Walz with their closeness to China. And then as governor, he plows almost $1 billion of state pension funds into Chinese funds. So he is investing Minnesotans' savings, their retirement money, in Chinese funds. And this is at a time, by the way, when every other state is pulling funds out of China. Tim Walz is doubling down on China.
Unbelievable. Folks, we're on with Seamus Bruner. And, what I find interesting about all this is there's a lot of uncurious members of the media that they could really care less about what's going on with Tim Walz and these connections, other than you and a handful of other people on, to the right of the center. Why is this? And again, I realize some of them are running cover, but I also feel like just some of them just don't care. They seem to think this is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and our own intelligence community. If this was Donald Trump, there would have been 15 investigations opened already by Chris Wray and the FBI, but they have been totally silent on this. And so Congress, James Comer and others are really pushing to get some answers. But, Dana Bash, she's married to a guy who's deep into the intelligence community. And so you'd think that they would have some curiosities here about America's number one adversary absolutely cultivating who is now a vice presidential candidate.
Now, we had Beijing Biden, and I remember around this time of the game in the last election, Biden did a town hall with CNN. And I forget who the host was, honestly, but I remember they brought up the question about, China and the way they kill people. And you probably remember this. And he said, well, these are cultural differences. And I was blown away that he said that, and they allowed that without any pushback, without any follow-up. And he was saying, that's just, they do things differently than we do. You got to understand that. And I thought, wow, just that is a crazy way of putting murder. They do things differently. But I thought things were bad with Beijing Biden. Now, with Tiananmen Tim, it seems like it's exacerbated because he's an altruist with this stuff, right? He's a real Kool-Aid sipper of this. And what type of implications do you think that has on the future of America should him and Kamala Harris actually, cross the finish line? God forbid.
Yeah, well, he's even worse than Biden, actually, because, like you said, it was shocking to hear Joe Biden say that. But Tim Walz has actually taken it a step further, and he's drawn this moral equivalence between the United States and ancient history. Specifically on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, which, by the way, he never calls it a massacre. He actually got married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square because, according to his wife, he wanted to remember their anniversary date. But when in Congress, as congressman, it's the 20th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and he's talking about it, and he actually says that, well, the United States actually did some bad things in the past too, and he specifically brings up Wounded Knee, which was a tragedy. No, nobody's going to excuse Wounded Knee, but this is a century and a half ago, and a couple of dozen Native Americans were killed. Tiananmen Square was upwards of 10,000 by some estimates. Thousands of student protesters and civilian protesters were slaughtered by the Chinese Communist Party. So there is no equivalence between those two events, and yet he seemingly says that America is pretty much just as bad. Never really talks about the Uyghurs or the ethnic cleansing or any of the other horrific stuff that is going on to this day.
Now, Seamus Bruner, I know that you and the team at the Government Accountability Institute are always up to something. Peter Schweitzer, you guys are putting books together and whatnot. What can we expect to come down the pipe? What are you working on? And give us a little scoop.
Yeah, well, we've got a bunch of investigations ongoing right now. We're going to have a big election report, all the threats to our election. I mean, it's too late to fix a lot of them now, but these are going to be ongoing threats. The mail-in ballots, I mean, states really need to clean up the election process. I know we all know that, preaching to the choir here. But we've got that. We've got some insider trading in Congress news going to break soon, and we're going to stick on this China stuff. I mean, Schweitzer's book, Blood Money, blew the lid off the fentanyl trade and how China is basically, doing it intentionally, giving things at cost to the cartels. A lot of people blame the cartels, but really this is a war on the United States by China. And also, Tim Walz, there's some really good stuff that we're going to drop in the next week or two.
Outstanding. Now, if people want to keep up to speed with you and all the work that you're doing, where do they go? How do they follow you? What's the website, the social handles? Give us everything.
Yeah, well, definitely follow Peter Schweitzer on all social platforms. Twitter or X is probably his most frequent place to post. I'm there too, at Seamus Bruner. We're posting all of our stuff there. We've got a website, thedrilldown.com, and Schweitzer hosts a podcast, The Drill Down with Peter Schweitzer, and you can get that on all podcast platforms.
Well, listen, brother, I appreciate the work you're doing. You're doing, the Lord's work, in my opinion, finding out what's going on and reporting it back to the rest of us. Folks, make sure you give Seamus Bruner a follow. He's a patriot. He's a scholar, and he's one of the good guys. I'm glad you're here, brother.
All right. Thanks, Rich. Good to talk to you.
You got it, man. Godspeed and have a good night. Now, straight ahead, your next dinner party, right? Let's say you don't bring Seamus Bruner with you to break down all the facts and to help you argue with all your, with your crazy uncle that loves Bernie Sanders and reminds you of Joe Biden. So what do you do? How do you get along? Well, I don't know if arguing with family about politics is really the best thing to do. Sometimes we need a lesson in actually getting along better. So I want to get into that straight ahead, because I think that's oftentimes what ends up happening, right? People, you can see families getting ripped apart because of this. Well, relationship coach Dr. Warren Ferrell is coming up next, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how to actually get that done. So keep it locked right here. It's Rich Valdez, America at Night. Don't go anywhere.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to it.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our conversation. And what do you do, right? What do you do when you have family members that don't agree with you politically? I mean, this has been the case since forever. I think it really kind of took root, at least for me, because I guess that was my coming of age, during the George W. Bush administration, where people were like, no way you're voting for that, and it was just like a big deal. And I remember seeing like women actually getting into like a hair pulling match during that election. And it's only gotten worse since, right? honestly, I haven't seen women fight physically over politics since George W. Bush era. But all that being said, what I think is interesting is that you've got some people out there that will just, instead of saying, look, let go and let God and, to each his own, some people think if you're a Trump supporter, if you're a Kamala supporter, then you are my enemy and I can't respect you and I can't support you. And some of you listening on the radio may believe that. I can't get there. And I guess the reason I can't get there, maybe it's, my worldview. Maybe it's the fact that, I enjoy my family even when I don't agree with them. I don't know. But I don't think we were designed to be in enmity, I think is the word I'm looking for, to constantly be at odds with our fellow man all the time. I just don't believe we are. Now, I understand if they're a threat to our safety and civility and, Western civilization, maybe, then maybe you can have some disdain towards what they believe, but still have a conversation and still, I guess, agree to disagree. At least that's my belief. I mean, sometimes people think that my approach is not hard enough. I don't know. But I do know I am in tears, hysterically laughing when I'm scrolling through social media and I hear the violins playing in the background, and there's this woman who is, just for the sake of describing for radio, overweight, Caucasian woman that is crying. She's sobbing about losing respect for her family members because they support Trump. Listen to this.
So who else has lost their family to Trump? I had this horrible conversation with my dad, my sister-in-law. They're still, after all this they're still Trump supporters. It's like, how can I respect you? How can I respect you if you are still a Trump supporter when you have a daughter and a great-granddaughter? F*** off, right? But, yeah, he's a Trump supporter. How has Trump stolen my family from me? I don't think I can talk to my dad or my sister-in-law, my brother ever again because they believe in this gross human. He's so gross. He's a grifter. He's just been a gross human. It's well documented.
He's a gross human. It's well documented. Listen, I couldn't help but laugh at that. But again, I tend to look at things like that anyway. I laugh at a lot of this stuff. But it's no laughing matter. And that's why I want to bring in one of the pros here. He's a relationship coach with over 30 years of experience, Dr. Warren Ferrell. He's got a PhD, not in psychology, but in political science, which is interesting. And he's got a book called Role Mate to Soulmate, How to Talk About Politics. Dr. Warren Ferrell, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And by the way, the type of attitude that you have is likely to allow you and your family to love each other a lot more than the other type of attitude.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I sit there sometimes, and it's funny. Everybody in my family's on the same side. It's just who's further to, the this or that on certain issues, and it becomes so contentious. But it's so funny, and I guess there's a lot of people going through this. There's a lot of people that don't want to associate with family members. I could care less. I invite the conversation, even if they're going to be nasty. I don't mind, honestly. I'd rather not. And I outside of the radio, I don't really even talk about this stuff that much because it's literally work, and sometimes it comes up. But I think the idea you want to find other things to talk about. Oh, how's Aunt Susie, and how is my nephew, and how's my niece, and how's that type of thing. But some people, they exist just to get into these political conversations. So I guess, where do we start in that? Are we wrong for being that person that feels like I love my country and I'm going to tell every last person, I'm going to be an evangelist for truth and liberty and the American way? Or should I be muted and hold my tongue just for the sake of peace?
Well, I think the starter place for me in the workshops I do is to teach couples who love each other, and therefore they have the investment of love in each other, love for each other, to know how to listen to each other and listen to criticism without becoming defensive, because that's the core of it. And historically and biologically speaking, if we heard criticism, we perceived an enemy. And so it was biologically natural to get up our defenses to kill the enemy before the enemy killed us. And that was functional for survival. It's just terrible for love. So the first things I do is to teach people how to set aside a time where they hear a perspective that they disagree with their wife, their husbands, and before they hear that perspective, that they meditate into since hearing criticism is defensively is the biologically natural state, they have to go into an unnatural state, a state of being able to hear to hear criticism, but associate criticism with the opportunity to be loved. So I have them. Let's say the first meditation is what I call the love guarantee, and they say, if I provide a safe space for you to say whatever you want, whenever you want, not whenever you want, whatever you want, and whatever tone you want, whether I totally agree or disagree with your perspective. If I provide that safe space, you'll feel like you don't have to walk on eggshells around me. You can bring up what you want at this point in time. You can feel that internal security. When you feel that internal security from me, you will feel more loved by me, and you'll feel more safe with me, and therefore you'll feel more love for me. And so now they're doing something that's biologically unnatural. They're beginning to associate being criticized with being loved. And so I go through a whole series, and that is really an evolutionary shift from what is natural. And
yeah. You would think if you're not criticizing me, I'd feel loved. Why is that? Just because they're so used to that volatile environment that it just doesn't go away?
I mean, people explain that last thing that you said again. You'd think that they are not criticizing.
Well, I'm just clarifying. I'm making sure I understood what you said.
Sure.
So you're saying unless they're getting criticized, they don't feel loved, or is it the other way around?
Oh, no. It's when they are, instead of somebody criticizing your partner spontaneously, I have everybody do what I call a caring and sharing time, where they set aside 2 hours a week to first appreciate each other at the beginning, and then at the end appreciate each other again. But in the middle, they say one concern that they have coming up that they were maybe keeping to themselves during the week, but before they bring up their concern, their partner, their loved one, meditates into an altered state where she or he says, if you feel completely heard by me, completely safe with me around this issue, you'll feel more love for me because you'll feel that safety, and therefore you'll feel more loved by me, and you'll feel more loved by me, and therefore more love for me. And so that's the beginning of the process that I teach couples to do, to be able to not only handle criticism without becoming defensive, but actually know that the more critical your partner is at that, if it's only one criticism during that period of time, and you've altered your biologically natural state first, that you will give your partner an experience of safety rather than having to walk on eggshells, and that experience of safety and security will make them feel more loved by you. And therefore, that even as you're hearing your partner say, really exaggerate something, or really get angry, or be sarcastic, or be critical, or say something in a way that's completely not correct from your perspective, that you'll be able to provide that safe environment, and then your partner feels, wow, here's somebody that really has left me feeling heard and seen and uninterrupted. And then I ask each person who hears that criticism to share with their partner exactly what she or he heard their partner say. And then after that they to make sure that they ask if they've distorted anything or if they've missed anything, and then invite them to add something more if they wish to. And when somebody has finished that process, they feel like, wow, I feel so safe with you. So the person listening to the criticism, knowing that once they experience that outcome a few times, they can actually realize that the angrier their partner is, the more, in a way, internally astonished they will be that they can be fully heard, and therefore the more they'll feel loved and seen and safe, no matter who they feel like being at a moment.
Doc, I want you to stand by. When we come back, maybe you can go a little more in depth on exactly how you get to that in your workshops, because I think most people want to feel heard and valued and like it's a non-volatile situation. But I think most people, at least the ones in my family, don't know how to create that environment. So we're going to learn more about your workshop, your techniques, and your book when we come back. Rollmate to Soulmate, How to Talk About Politics. We're coming right back with Dr. Warren Farrell.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
It's a story about a woman who walked into a bridal shop one day, told the sales clerk that she was looking for a wedding gown for her 4th wedding. Well, the saleswoman asked, just exactly what type of dress are you looking for? A long, flowing white dress with a veil, she responded with assurance. Not totally convinced, but afraid to offend the woman, the sales lady said, you know, dresses of that nature are usually more appropriate for brides who are being married for the first time, for those a bit more innocent, if you know what I mean. Well, the lady retorted and put her hand on her hip. I do know what you mean, and I can assure you I'm as innocent as the rest of them. Despite all my marriages, I remain as innocent as any first-time bride. Well, you see, my first husband was a dear, sweet man. It was a terrible tragedy, actually. All the excitement of the wedding was simply too much for him, and he died as we checked into the hotel on our wedding night. I'm sorry to hear that, said the clerk, but what about the others? Well, my second husband and I got into a terrible fight in the limousine on the way to our wedding reception. We haven't spoken since and got the marriage quickly annulled. What about your third husband? Asked the store clerk. Well, the woman replied, he was a Democrat. And every night for 4 years, he just sat on the edge of the bed and told me how good it was going to be. Sorry, I just couldn't resist telling that.
Now, couldn't we all be like President Reagan and use a little humor when talking about political differences? Unfortunately, I think that escapes us, right? And we have to deal with the reality of the vitriol. But do we? And that's why I want to return to our conversation with Dr. Warren Farrell. He's a relationship coach and the author of the book, Rollmate to Soulmate, How to Talk About Politics. And that's what we're discussing. And this is the question. We left off with how you conduct your workshop so that people feel valued and heard and secure in being able to share their opinions and be heard in those opinions. How do you get people to do that when oftentimes most people in politics, or at least when you're debating politics, even if you're letting your opponent or your adversary or the person you're having the dialogue with talk, you're usually formulating your response without even paying attention, right? And I'm not saying it's something I do. It's something I notice that a lot of people do. Don.
Absolutely. It's what I call self-listening. And what I teach in the regular couples workshop is people how to attach to the experience and the feelings that the partner has, and how to detach from their self-listening, listening to themselves, prepare responses while the other people are talking. But now to move that to once I teach them that, I then teach them how to modify that, to apply that to a family member that they really care about, but that has different values, both maybe religiously and politically. And you can either avoid discussing politics altogether, but it's sad because if you want to love your family and appreciate where they're coming from. So when I have them do this in a family situation, the first thing that I have them do is to express appreciation for each other. So most family members know each other, and they know something. They may have respected. Maybe a father is dealing with a daughter, let's say, and the daughter's come back from college, and and the father's worked all his life to put her through college, and she was the first one in the family, let's say, to go to college, and he's so proud of her for becoming a really a wonderful being the first person to go to college, and it's Thanksgiving, and the father proudly says, tell us everything you learned in school, and she says, well, one of the things that I learned is that that we live in a patriarchal world where all the men are oppressors and women are the oppressed, and so I could see much more easily how much you are part of that patriarchy, Dad. Well, the average dad may not feel that.
I would die laughing if I heard that.
Yeah, this was a real life experience from a guy who was a cab driver just before Uber became popular, and he had spent 70 hours a week driving a cab, and he told me this experience. So, all right, let's say something like that happens, and so the woman is really engaged with feminism, and the man is really like, are you kidding me, an oppressor? Look what I've spent my life doing to you. So the first thing that I would have, let's say, the father do is to appreciate the characteristics of his daughter. To say, you've always spoken up, and you've always been so articulate, and you've always been so thoughtful, and you've always had a really good way of approaching things, and you've been so articulate, and you read, and you're curious. So the first step in the process before you hear the person's political opinions is to appreciate them as a person. I teach people how to do this even when they've just met the person. There's, we wear our life. The fingerprint of our life is in our body language and our eye contact and the way we hold ourselves. So you can really do this pretty quickly as you get to meet somebody. So that's step one.
Let's pause right there before we get to step two. We'll do that in the other break. Right now, we're going to take a pause right here. Folks, we're coming right back with Dr. Warren Ferrell, author of Role Mate to Soulmate. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez with you straight till 1 a.m. Eastern. And, of course, Open Phone America is coming up. But right now I want to get to step number 2 with Dr. Warren Ferrell before they kick us out of here. Doc, take it away.
All right. Step number 2 is that the dad would say to the daughter, I want you to know that I see that you really care. I want you to know that I feel like you are not apathetic. And people who care and people who are not apathetic, that's what a democracy is made of. And so you contribute to that, even if we disagree as to how, where we come out on a different political issue. Now, there's a number of more steps to that, and I have to say that that when I teach in these steps in the workshop, either for personal relationships or political relationships, what I call civil war to civil dialogue, they're heard by somebody at the workshop. They practice them effectively at the workshop, but they take them home and they forget about them unless they continue to practice. This is a book that's not just read, and Role Mate to Soulmate has to be practiced.
Outstanding. Dr. Warren Ferrell, author of the book Role Mate to Soulmate. I want to thank you for being here. We'll definitely have you back and talk more about it. Check out his website, warrenferrell.com. Sir, I appreciate you. Good night. God bless and Godspeed to you. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Open Phone America starts right now. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. It's the Tuesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national. The phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And where do we start? Jack Smith, the special prosecutor from the Biden administration, has brought new charges on an old case against President Trump, resulting in a new indictment. And after the last one was thrown out, Trump responded to that, saying a lot of things. Let me see. I have it right here, his response. Full statement. And he said, and it's not even the full statement, it's, chunks of it. But he says, in an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt in Washington, D.C., in an act of desperation and in order to save face, the illegally appointed special counsel, deranged Jack Smith, has brought a ridiculous new indictment against me. Actually, I think I have this in the clip with the report. I played it in the top of the first hour, but I'm going to play it again because I think it's important for you to hear this. Check this out.
Federal prosecutors today issued a revised version of an indictment accusing former President Trump of plotting to overturn the 2020 election, stripping out some charges in order to help it survive the Supreme Court's recent ruling granting former presidents broad immunity for official acts in office. Well, former President Trump issued quite the lengthy diatribe there on Truth Social. This was one part of it. He said in response, quote, in an effort to resurrect a dead witch hunt in Washington, D.C., in an act of desperation and in order to save face, the illegally appointed, quote-unquote, special counsel, deranged Jack Smith, has brought a ridiculous new indictment against me, which has all the problems of the old indictment and should be dismissed immediately, all caps. His Florida document hoax case has been completely dismissed. This is merely an attempt to, all caps, interfere with the election and distract the American people from the catastrophes Kamala Harris has inflicted on our nation, like the border invasion, migrant crime, rampant inflation, the threat of World War III, and more.
The threat of World War III and more. Of course, that is compliments of Que Mala Eres and, of course, Tiananmen Tim Walz. Unbelievable. So Trump again responding to that. He went on to say, for them to do this immediately after our Supreme Court victory on immunity and more is shocking. I've also been informed by my attorneys that you're not even allowed to bring cases literally right before an election. That's a direct assault on democracy. Yeah, I agree with that. This is an unprecedented abuse of the criminal justice system. This case has to do with conspiracy to obstruct the 2020 presidential election, when they're the ones that did the obstructing on the election, not me. They cheated on the election, and they go after me for cheating on the election. Interestingly, this comes at the same time Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook has admitted to concealing massive amounts of information, such as Hunter Biden's laptop from hell, which is a direct acknowledgement that the 2020 presidential election was manipulated and rigged by the Department of Justice. What are they doing? What they're doing now is the single greatest sabotage of our democracy in history. Of course, that's El Trompito, and he went on and on. And let me tell you, he was on a roll. So that is Jack Smith and that crazy. Then we've got a little bit more, right? We've got, what else? Let me see. Hold on. Stand by. There was another story here. Here we go. Trump has reached an agreement with Vice President Kamala Harris on a debate. Listen to this. They've reached an agreement on a debate on ABC News, September 10th. The debate will be held in Philadelphia, Trump said in the Truth Social post. The September 10th date was originally agreed upon back in May to be the second debate between Trump and Joe Biden. However, Biden dropped out of the race on July 21st. So Trump said in Tuesday's post that the rules will be the same as the last CNN debate. Wow. I guess that means empty room and all that. Unbelievable. And that Trump had with Biden on June 27th, blah, 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 blah. It was reported Monday that the Harris team wanted hot mics throughout this next debate, a departure from Biden's red line. Trump said Monday he'd rather have it on, but said it didn't matter. Trump's post on Tuesday implies the mics will be muted. I have reached an agreement with the radical left Democrats. This is Trump. For a debate with Comrade Kamala Harris. It will be broadcast live on ABC Fake News. By far the nastiest and most unfair newscaster in the business, Trump said in the Post. The rules will be the same as the CNN debate, which seemed to work out well for everyone except perhaps crooked Joe Biden. The debate will be stand-up, and candidates cannot bring notes or cheat sheets. A nod to Harris. And a nod to a Harris request. Jason Miller, senior advisor for Trump, said over the weekend that Harris asked for a seated debate with notes and opening statements, like a courtroom. We said no changes to the rules. That was smart of Trump. So she wanted to bring in her note card so that she could do whatever. And he said, let's really put her to the test off the top of the dome piece. I love it. Harris, however, would not agree to a debate on Fox News a week before, Trump said. And Harris would not agree to this Fox debate on September 4th. But that date will be held open in case she changes her mind or flip-flops, as she's done on every single one of her long-held and cherished policy beliefs, Trump wrote. A possible third debate, which would go to NBC Fake News, has not been agreed upon by the radical left. That's, again, a quote from Trump. So that's the story on the debate. I'm looking forward to it. I'm selling tickets. I'm going to host a party to watch that thing. Let me tell you, I think that's going to be a blast to watch El Trompito lay the smackdown, or vice versa. Listen, I think she's going to be ready for about the first 15 minutes. She's going to do well. She's going to come in and say, I know your type. You're a this and a that. And she's going to, land a couple of shots. But that's it. After that, I don't think she's out of her league. She's not going to be able to handle it. I mean, maybe we're being generous in 15 minutes. Maybe it's a little more, a little less. But ultimately, 90 minutes in, she's not going to be able to really handle herself, because we've seen Kamala unscripted. She says things like, our allies in North Korea. No, we don't have allies in North Korea. We've seen her. She's a gaffe machine. And in my opinion, she doesn't have a firm grasp on all the issues. She really doesn't. And that, I think, is what's going to hurt her. If you don't have an intimate understanding of what's going on in the world around you, if you think that the reason we're having massive unchecked immigration at the southern border is because of what Reagan did in the 80s and the Northern Triangle and this, that, and the other, I've got news for you. Maybe I even got a bridge to sell you. But this doesn't look good. So I give her 15 minutes of looking good in the debate before she starts looking dizzy and Trump starts coming in with the KO punches. Figuratively speaking, of course. Anyway. I want to get your thoughts on this stuff. Let's go to Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Frank, go right ahead.
Hey, Rick. Hey. Yeah, I wanted to talk about Governor Walz' miracle ear. He, well, whatever it is, it's a prosthetic hearing device he got while in Army practice or National Guard practice on throwing hand grenades, how to quell the citizens of the United States with hand grenades or whatever they have to do. But he doesn't have the tinnitus anymore because he has a hearing aid similar to mine, but his is implanted. I have a miracle ear hearing aid, but I can hear Bluetooth messages from the phone. So if I had to be on the vice presidential debate podium, I could get cues left and right from without the cheat notes and everything else. Just how do you block that kind of interference? Without being schizoid.
That's a really interesting thing. But the reality is, Tim Walz, I think, can handle himself better on a debate stage than Kamala Harris can. Tim Walz is a politician. He went to Congress. He ran for governor. He won. He won both of those elections. Now he's going to do more campaigning. He's used to the scrutiny. And he really believes his what's the term they use? Democratic socialist positions, Right. So I think it's a different story. Now, if we find out that Kamala Harris also has a hearing aid, all right, now I say, hold on, stop the presses. What's going on, and what are you really hearing in that hearing aid? You know, who do we got telling you what to say? It's like a Cyrano de Bergerac meets Kamala Harris. That would be crazy. But anyway, thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. Good to hear your voice. I always appreciate it when you participate in the program. And, folks, we're going to get to the rest of your calls and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
But I got to tell you, as much as I am frustrated with Kamala Harris, I am so hopeful about the future of our country. We have the most beautiful country in the entire world, don't we? I've been flying around the country. I've been driving around the country, and you get a new perspective running to be the next vice president that I'm so grateful for. We've got natural resources all across this country that are the envy of the world, my friends. We just need better leadership. It is that simple. Better leadership. That's all we need to fix this country.
That's J.D. Vance crisscrossing the nation, campaigning, taking questions from the media, taking questions from voters, out there pressing the flesh, shaking hands, kissing babies. Everything Kamala Harris and Tiananmen Tim are not doing. But they're going to sit down for a candidate forum where they're going to answer, I guess, some very softball questions. What's your name? How old are you? What's your favorite color? What do you like to eat? And why is Donald Trump bad? And they're going to have that interview on Thursday. But why won't she sit down with Fox? Why won't she sit down with Newsmax? Why won't she sit down with me, Rich Valdez? El Macho, right? Why not? I'll be nice. I know how to be nice. I learned how to be nice years ago. I swear I did. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping at least maybe Tiananmen Tim, right? We have a great coverage in the Midwest and that part of the world that he's trying to affect, right? That's why they went with him, because he was a Minnesotan, right? We reached the Midwest really well. So what's up? Maybe we got to work again. Let me contact our booking team and see if we can get Tiananmen Tim Walz. And I promise I won't call him Tiananmen Tim. But I have to let him know that I call him that, right? Because if I don't, then he'll think it's hypocritical of me. And that would make bad radio. I want to make good radio. Anyway, let's go here to Linda. She's in Pennsylvania. And where in Pennsylvania are you, Linda?
It's Upper Chichester.
Upper Chichester, Pennsylvania, WDEL.
Yeah, it's very, very close to the Delaware border.
And tell us what's on your mind about Kamala Harris and the debates.
Well, so I listen to WDEL in the morning as well, talk radio, and it was an interesting discussion about how Kamala, or as you say, Kamala.
That's right.
How bad Harris has a strategy that she uses. And they were saying you just had to look back at her debate with Pence. And she'll put her hand up and say, I'm talking. Give me a minute to finish. I'm talking, as a teacher might do to a fourth grader. And that most people then will not interrupt her, or not, they'll give her time, or Pence said something about, well, let's talk about, I'm fixing to talk about that. She won't let anybody get an edge in. And they were saying that, she wants hot mics on the debate. And the thought was that she wants to provoke Trump to interrupt her when she's saying things like that, so that they can get sound bites and so that they can show how he's a bully. How he doesn't respect women when they're talking, how he's a bully, and that's why it would probably be better for him to have a muted mic because he can't help himself.
Exactly. But he beat him to the punch saying, I'll take the deal from the Biden deal, which I thought was a pretty brilliant move.
But I just thought it was interesting that she uses a strategy all the time, and
you're right.
Very much like a teacher talking to a fourth grader. And
I think that won't work with Trump, only because he has his own version of that where he goes, excuse me, and he'll just continue talking over you. And I think it's a good way to combat her filibuster of, excuse me, I'm talking, right? So they're both using a similar technique. I just think he's probably better at it than she is, Linda.
Well, probably. And if she's not going to be able to have notes or she's going to have to be speaking off the cuff, she may get frustrated and not be able to hold that cool that she normally does with that strategy. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I can't wait. Listen, I can't wait. I'm selling tickets. I'm going to rent something out and have people over because I think that this is it's going to be really, really good to watch. This is going to be one of the best ever because, again, she wasn't great. Her strategy worked because she was kind of railroading Joe Biden. That was her biggest moment in her 2020 presidential debate. She was railroading Joe Biden while she was saying, I was that little black girl on the bus, right? Which people debate that if it's even true or not. But the reality was it was a good theatrical moment. And she's going to have a couple more of those, where she attacks him for being a racist, a rapist, and everything else that she's going to try and accuse him of, erroneously at that. And that is going to, I think, cause for him to defend himself. The question is going to be how he defends himself. And I think Trump's been around the block enough times to realize that she's going to try and goad him into losing his cool. I think, he's too swift for that. So I don't think that's going to work, and I think he's ultimately, at the end of the day, he's going to win this thing hands down. It's my opinion. Linda in Upper Chichester, Pennsylvania, WDEL is the radio station. Thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate hearing from you, and I hope you'll call again. I always appreciate hearing from people from that section of Pennsylvania. We don't always get callers from there, so thank you for that. And coming up, we got calls from Idaho, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's all over the place tonight. So we're going to get to your thoughts on that. If you think Kamala's going to do well, we're going to get to you straight after the break. And the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Plus, we have a couple of news updates I want to bring you and a couple other things that I want to bring up. So just keep it locked right here. We're only halfway through this hour number 3. We call it Open Phone America. Don't go anywhere.
America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The social and economic benefits of homeownership should be accessible to everyone, regardless of immigration status.
The program provides first-time buyers with a zero-interest loan up to 20% of a home's purchase price. That's about $150,000 cash up front for down payment or closing costs. This year, the $255 million program sold out in 11 hours. So they used a lottery, 18,000 people applying for 2,000 spots. The state is repaid when the home is sold, plus a small percentage of any appreciation. The bill is sponsored by a prominent Latino rights group with close ties to Vice President Harris.
Now, again, these lawmakers are in California. They're putting together this bill that, again, just to repeat what you just heard, California Dream for All loan program. It's a state-funded program that provides 20% in down payment assistance up to $150,000. Wow. Participants in the program must be first-time homebuyers. At least one must be a first-generation homebuyer, while income levels must be below certain criteria. But this is literally California Democrats close to approving $150,000 loans for illegal immigrants to help them purchase homes. I'm about to start saying I'm an illegal immigrant, so I can get $150K to drop it on a nice condo in Brickell in Miami. Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, it's amazing how we're doing this. Amazing to me. We're bringing people from other countries and buying them houses? No, just the down payment assistance. Still, come on. I mean, and that's in California. It's not nationwide, but you know how this is. It's a pilot program. You test it out in California, and then you roll it out everywhere else. New York, Boston, Chicago. Next thing you know, all right, let's do it coast to coast. We're going to start giving you government money to pay for your home, and we're going to need more government money. And it's just going to be a vicious cycle. Unbelievable. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this and so much more. But first, I want to go to George. He's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He thinks Kamala Harris is going to clean Trump's clock. Go right ahead, George.
Hello, my friend. Buenos dias, Senor Valdez, with an S. I like that. Because I thought maybe you were Greek at first, you know? I love the Latinos, lived in New York, the whole bit. And your music is some of the best. It's my second time calling you. I think Miss Harris is going to come out of the gate. She's going to be on her game because she always is. I really believe that silliness or that nervous laugh that she used to be portrayed with a while back. I don't seem to see that any longer. I don't know if you see that at all. Those were just
I see it daily.
Bites, visual bites.
I see it every day. But what makes you think? Well, let me ask you this: what has been her best extemporaneous performance? Where, no teleprompter, no note cards, no notes, just her and the knowledge in her brain. When was the best performance from Kamala Harris?
I'd have to say all along. I think her
No, just pick one. Tell me this speech, that speech, this conference, that conference. Which one stands out in your mind? Because most of them are scripted.
Oh, they probably are, but I'd have to say...
Well, it's not probably. That's what the debate here, George. The debate we're having here is that Kamala Harris... Hang on a second. That Kamala Harris she's doing things with a teleprompter, so it's a pre-written speech. She is not engaging with the actual media, asking questions in a press conference. It's been 37 days, tomorrow 38 days, where she has not taken a question from the media. And this is problematic, I think, for people, because... she's controlling, this is a monologue, right? This is, me and you are having a dialogue, right? I open up the phone line so that people from all over the country can call and challenge me and ask me questions, and we have a conversation. Kamala Harris is doing a one-way radio show. She's on the mic. She says what she wants. She says bad things about Trump, and then she laughs, ha, 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 and then she comes back, and that's it. And nobody gets to follow up and ask or push back. So I can't think of a time in recent memory where she's done well when she's been off the camera. Recently, she was with Joe Biden, and they were talking about Afghanistan. I thought she did a horrible job. She says things like the school bus thing. The school bus, it's yellow, the wheels on the bus go round and round. She says these silliest things, and she's known for her word salad. So the reason you haven't heard it in a while is because for the last 37 days, she's been hiding. She has not given a non-scripted interview or talk or anything. She has not been off of a teleprompter for 37 days. They've been protecting her because they know When it's just her and the microphone and what's in her brain, she doesn't do well, George.
Well, she's been around for a long time. To be a prosecuting attorney or any kind of a professional skilled in any type of oratory, which she is, she'll make the Donald look like. And again, I voted for him in 17, 16. But
well, I mean, I got to go back. I got to push back on that because, again, I don't know that she's skilled in oratory. I don't know that I can take Kamala Harris and give her a microphone and say, speak to this group of people and tell them what you know about X, Y, or Z. I think she's good at having a legal pad and studying for days on her opening and closing arguments, which are written down, and she can go in there and make a case for herself. I think she's good at sound bites. I think she's good at a lot of short things. But when it comes to actually asking her, you know, what are you going to do with the issues? For example, she was speaking off the cuff about North Korea, and she said, our great ally in North Korea. Now, this wasn't just a gaffe where she misspoke. She legitimately thought that North Korea was an ally of ours. That's not the case. So, again, I don't see how her, you know, being a good speech maker on a teleprompter is going to help her in going toe-to-toe with a former president. And I think you're just not giving Trump enough credit. But Trump is somebody who does a rally once or twice a week to 20, 30,000 people at a clip. And in these rallies, he uses a teleprompter, but he goes off script for an hour. And he just goes off the dome for an hour on his experiences as president, on his ideas for his future presidency. He has a lot in that brain of his that comes out. And I have not seen that level of policy chops from Kamala Harris. I haven't seen that level of ideas coming out of Kamala Harris. So I'm glad that you have the enthusiasm you do. But I think the debates are really going to, you know, really set the tone, because Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo and the rest of them are all going to say Kamala Harris did an amazing job. And when she goes after him and says, you're a racist, you're a rapist, I know your type, you're a swindler, and we're going to put you in jail because I'm a prosecutor and you're a felon. These are fine. They're great. But that isn't going to help America, right? She needs to be able to answer, hey, listen, I've been in the White House with Joe Biden for the last 4 years as vice president of the United States. I've been in charge of the border because Joe Biden put me in charge of the border for the last 4 years. And all we've done is make things worse. In fact, I come from California, and California is now thinking of giving $150,000 loans to illegal immigrants so that they can buy a home here. We're letting people in from other countries so that they can get $150,000 of your tax dollars and mine so they can buy a home when they haven't contributed to this tax system. And I know for a fact that Kamala Harris has never given you $150,000 for a home.
Well, sir, I think you should be your campaign manager, because everything you said, I kind of agree with. All I could say is we're going to be into the middle of September. This will be history. We're going to go into October. More October surprises will come out for the felon. And when he starts talking and he goes off script, he sounds like, and I said this all along when I was in his campaign and when I was in his train, very, 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 very. He's like a third grader trying to stretch a 15-word paragraph out to 25 words. And it's just almost embarrassing. So that's where we are. And like I said, I liked him because I wanted him, and I wanted a couple of the Combs from out there in the East Coast.
Yeah. So, what about the people, or what do you think of the people that just enjoyed Trump's presidency because they didn't need the government to give them $150,000 for a down payment? They had a down payment. More blacks and Hispanics bought homes during the Trump administration than ever before. And that's just a fact, right? People appreciate that. I can tell you, I know people, a bunch of people, my contemporaries that, are apolitical, my age, I'm in my 40s, and they don't care about politics, but they cared about buying a home for their wife and for their kids. They don't have something like that they can say with Kamala Harris. They can't turn around and say, man, the economy's been so good with Bidenomics and Kamalanomics has worked out so well. They don't have that. They can't say, wow, immigration, they've done a great job at the border, Joe and Kamala. They can't say that either. They really don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to policy or accomplishments, and Trump does. Whether or not you like his, what you call third grade antics, stretching out a sentence, most people liked having more money. Most people liked the fact that there were no new wars. Most people liked the fact that he actually signed a peace agreement with several countries in the Middle East and Israel, the Abraham Accords. What's happened under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris You've got Israel that's at war with Iran proxies. So I just don't see clear as day for me the Trump administration versus the Harris administration that we've seen for 4 years, how she's going to be able to say, for the last 4 years, I've been screwing the economy, ripping you people off. Look at the gas prices, look at the grocery prices, and do me a favor, vote for me again. I don't see it flying. George, thanks for the call. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. I appreciate the conversation. I got to take a pause here, coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, we continue. Let us go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBFI. Paul, go right ahead.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich.
Yes, sir.
Another great show. Another
Thank
great
you.
show. I'm used to getting great shows. Don't let me down.
Oh, man, it's a lot of hard work with a great team behind us. Thank God.
Yeah, you did a yeoman's work right there with that guy, too. He was trying real hard telling us that Trump's a third grader.
Yeah, well, you see, here's the thing, Paul, with guys like that. I'm not upset with that guy because he's very limited. I'm grateful that he listens to this show, along like you and Dr. Phil and others that listen to the show. But ultimately, he's got very limited options, right? He's got to listen to CNN or watch CNN, MSNBC. The media is stacked against the truth. So he can only go. When he said, I haven't seen her do that cackling laugh in quite some time, A, that's because she's hiding, and B, because he's not looking in the right places. And not any fault of his own. It's the fact that the media gives you the story they want you to know. And when I say the media, I mean, I'm talking about, the cable news, all of them, right? Even the ones I like included. I think Fox, Newsmax, again, their commentary skews to the right. CNN's commentary skews towards the left. The big difference is their news also is skewed left or right on CNN. It's always left. And the news, in my opinion, seems pretty down the middle, and it's fair. And you can differentiate the news. If you're watching Newsmax, for example, you can differentiate the news from the commentary, right? The commentary hosts are commentary hosts. They give opinion, and that's it. The news people are news people. Now, you have some news people that do commentary, but they're not there as news people. They're there as news people that do commentary. And I think it's very clear. It's like reading a newspaper where it says editorial versus, the front page. And when you have a newspaper that puts their editorial on the front page, other than like an endorsement during election time, then this can be perceived as propaganda. And that's exactly the problem. So that's why you have guys like George in Pittsburgh that just believe that side of the story, where he thinks that Trump is droning on and on and on. But there's real numbers there to back that up, right? There's an actual record. And I think that's the issue. So as much as I want to have these discussions, I have to remember that there's a million like George out there, millions of them. And it's up to you, Paul, and up to me and the rest of the folks that are, looking to promote the truth and share the truth with those that are listening to them, whether it's, you and your people, me and my people, whatever the case is. We have to do our job, Paul.
Yeah, I did want to mention about Blinken again going at it, trying to get the hostages freed. And that, and I hope he's successful this time.
Me too.
He's batting 0 for 10.
Yeah, he's very weak, and the reality is, he's never. I don't believe he's going to be successful. Something that General Blaine Holt said on this program, and President Donald Trump said it also. And it's disparaging, but the sentiment is, I don't think there are any hostages left, or they won't be alive much longer. And that's sad. And you don't want to operate from that perspective because you want to think, we're going to go in there and get our people back and do the right thing. But when you're dealing with a group like this that is this brutal in the way they do what they do, I don't think you can have much trust for them. And sadly, every single deal, right? They said, all right, we finally got Netanyahu. Everybody's been complaining about Bibi Netanyahu's this and he's that and he's the third. But all of a sudden you get Netanyahu to the table and he says, yes, I'll agree to these terms for a ceasefire. And then who bails out and doesn't want to participate? Hamas. And this is not the first time. So clearly, if they don't want to agree to those terms, it's because they don't want the ceasefire, because they likely just want to keep fighting because they don't have the leverage anymore. It's my thinking. And maybe it's the wrong way to think. Maybe it's too jaded. But I pray to God I'm wrong. But to me, it sounds like they don't have a bargaining chip. So they're like, screw you. Let's keep fighting. I don't know. I really hope I'm wrong. What do you think, Paul?
According to them, they still have the hostages, which are the bargaining chips. But I don't believe them. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. And man, it just breaks my heart. They're being tortured.
Absolutely. It's horrible. And you think about these tunnels and the way they're treating people, just horrible. Paul, I got to take a pause here. We're coming right back with the speed round. Big shout out to KBFI, everybody listening in Boise, Idaho, and everybody listening online as well, richvaldez.com. We come back, Pittsburgh, Arkansas, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's continue the conversation with Brody, Pittsburgh, KDKA. Brody, what's on your mind?
I have nothing. I'm from Pittsburgh, too, KDKA area. I have nothing to do. I don't drink the same water as George. I wanted to talk. Yeah, he didn't bring up one thing. Forget it. I'm not wasting my time on him.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about it's not even worth it. What about the election integrity of 2020? I'm just looking at the map here. Is there going to be, is that all stifled also by the mainstream media as well? Because there's all these
I think that's taboo
that are going on.
Yeah, and they should continue. I'm glad that the legislature is holding those hearings. Sadly, the media holds that stuff as taboo. It's like if you dare say there was an irregularity, there was something was miscounted, we don't think that everything was on the up and up in the 2020 election, you are somehow lacking credibility as a human being. You are somehow no longer legitimate. You are some sort of crackpot crazy, which is why I just joke around and all. I say, let me put on my tinfoil hat because I'm very curious about certain things like that, and we should. I mean, I think it's great that the RNC. We had Michael Watley, the chairman, on the other day, and he said there's 100,000 lawyers that are now volunteering for Election Day to deal with these issues, election integrity issues, and they're between now and Election Day, they're going at it. So I think that's fantastic. I don't know what will come of the hearings in Pennsylvania, but I'm glad they're having them. Brody, I got to run. I appreciate it. KDKA in the building. Thanks for the call, my brother. Let's go to Joe, Salem, Arkansas. You got 45 seconds. Make it count.
Yes, sir. I dig that Dr. Phil McGraw. If I hadn't had WLS, I wouldn't have got his interview. I did it an hour and a half on KSAR.
Nice. So you listened to two stations in one night, and you got Dr. Phil. Joe, I always appreciate you, my brother. Hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I am Rich Valdez.